My name is Dr. Yeshua Israel. I am the founder of Beit Israel, the Purple House of the Shekinah. And we teach a technology of consciousness called the self-reflection technique. The self-reflection technique is a meditation involving the mental repetition of a mantra, and a mantra is a mind tool. I was born into a family that was religious, and we read the Bible and said prayers, and we talked about God, and we had discussions about God, and we read stories about God in the Bible. And I did this for the first phase of my life until I graduated from high school and joined the Marine Corps. And by the time I went to do my undergraduate work and completed it, I went to graduate school. And I had become burnt out, if you will, with reading about God, because a book about God is not the experience of God. A theory about God, a conception about God, is not the experience of God, because knowledge consists of two aspects, theory and direct experience. So in my mid-20s, as a graduate student, I was seeking a direct experience of God because I had read the stories about God in the Torah and in the Tanakh and in the New Testament and in the Quran, and had been introduced to the Cabernagus, some more stories about mysticism. And I was seeking a direct experience of God, so I became interested in spirituality. And spirituality for me was not theoretical. It was a means by which I could take my mind into the non-changing aspects of life, which is called spirituality, and give my consciousness an experience of unity with the ultimate reality. So my question here that Bastien'S asks, how did you begin your journey into spirituality and meditation? Was there a specific event or experience that sparked that interest? And the second part of this question I'll answer. The specific event was I found myself in a very rigorous academic program, and I needed to enhance my intellectual capacity. I need to broaden my vistas of perception, of reading information, taking in information, and become more competitive in a rigorous academic setting like I found myself in Purdue. And I felt that meditation, after reading about meditation, just the information of what it could do, would afford me this opportunity, would increase my intellect. So I was initiated into a practice of transcending subjectivity to experience the ultimate reality. Now, the theoretical model was the science of creative intelligence, that life can be objectified on two levels: the relative changing and the eternal non-changing aspect of life. That life consists in its totality of two aspects: the unmanifest, eternal, non-changing Purusha, or consciousness, from which arises a changing, relative, temporal, objective world. And I began to explore this subjectively with my own meditation technique, into which I was initiated, and had the experience of transcending my small self and experience the universal self. After meditating for a substantial period, my awareness shifted from the relative aspects of myself as the actor in activity to that of the witness established in the non-changing aspect of being. So this was my initiation into the spiritual path, the path that opened my perceptions to the infinite field of pure potentiality, by which I could infuse that into my nervous system and mind and refine and optimize the neurological aspects of my body. And of course, my body is the means by which I interact with the world through my senses, my seeing, hearing, touching, my intellect. And as I continued to meditate, my mind, which initially had been imbalanced to give rise to the perception of myself as an individual, transformed and became that of a cosmic entity that was beyond relativity and all of its activity. And I became established in my cosmic self. So this was the means by which I started to meditate and pursued meditation for the rest of my life. I've been meditating now maybe 47 years, nearly a half a century, and have profound neurophysiological transformation in my intelligence and my joy, and my overall state of well-being is blissful. The second question that I'm asked, can you share a particular significant transformative meditation experience? Yeah, as I continued to practice meditation more and more and more, I began to become aware of myself even in the transcendental field. Initially, when I was initiated into the process of the practice of meditation, I used a mantra, and the mantra was mentally repeated. And as the mantra was mentally repeated, there was some refinement in my perception of the mantra. And as the body and mind correlated, as my mind settled down, so did my body settle down. And as my body settled down, stresses were released that initially prevented the experience of totality. And I became increasingly identified with the transcendental aspect of myself as stresses were released during the meditation process. So my mind settled down, body released stress. And I came to a point where I had the finest experience of the relative. The finest experience of the relative. Then after that, my mind slipped beyond the relative into the transcendental field, the field of pure consciousness, the field of pure potentiality. And initially it was just a very abstract experience of restful alertness. No ability to think in that. It was just an awareness that I wasn't asleep, but I wasn't cognizant of what I was experiencing. And as I continued to, and then of course I come out of my meditation, become aware of myself again, and back into activity, experiencing the ordinary three states of consciousness: waking, sleeping, and dreaming state of consciousness. And scientific research was occurring in the latter part of the 20th century to validate the experiences doing deep meditation. For example, electrodes were hooked up to the brain and measured certain aspects of neurophysiology and found that there was a hypometabolic state associated with deep state of meditation and transcendence, and that gave rise to the notion of a fourth state of consciousness. So as I meditated, I became aware of advanced techniques and became familiar with the transcendent and began to initiate thought in this transcendental field. And in this transcendental field, whatever desire was surrendered in this infinite stillness gained the support of nature, the total support of nature, giving rise to any particular desire that was surrendered in this infinite field of potentiality, creating the fulfillment of certain desires. And so this was the tremendous transformative meditative experience that I began to have after I had meditated perhaps a significant period, 10, 15, 20 years. I learned this technique and began to fulfill my desires and gain the support of nature, so that even as I began to think about certain things, events would happen in relativity. If I had the thought of going to Africa, for example, many times someone would come along and say, there's an opportunity to go to Africa. Would you like to pursue this? And different desires I had, all of my desires began to be fulfilled almost instantaneously, or very quickly. So this was the very profound impact of knowing that meditation had a goal of creating heaven on earth for me, because the meditation itself was very charming, and it has neurophysiological correlates that optimize my body and my potential, the potential of my brain, and integrated hemispheric coherence, and my thinking became more profound. And as your thinking becomes more profound, you become more successful at your task and your profession. And I was interested, as I said at the outset, in optimizing my intellectual potential so that I could become more successful in life. The third question that Bastien has asked is, through your travels, have you encountered spiritual practices or philosophies that deeply influenced your own spiritual path? Yes, in the relative, because we have relative and absolute. And my meditation is an experience of transcending relativity to experience the absolute pure field of being. But I encountered in my life on my journey, because my grandparents were saying that we were the children of Israel. And I was always intrigued, and my karma allowed me to meet many Jews. In fact, my professor at Purdue was a Yehudi, and my major professor while I was in graduate school in my doctoral program at the University of Wisconsin was a very pious Jew. And when I told him that my grandmother had shared with me that I was an ancient Israelite, then he taught me a very interesting prayer. He said, you should know the Shema. And I said, what is the Shema? He said the Shema was a Hebraic sequence, a sequence of letters, sequence of words that declared the sovereignty and indivisive, unique nature of God. And when saying this prayer, one could feel it neurophysiologically, and he taught it to me. And he said, just say this prayer every day in Ivrit, and you'll see remarkable changes that take place in your life. And the prayer was the Shema, and I've been saying the Shema now for many, many years. The prayer is El Melech Namen, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Eloheinu Hashem Echad, Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. V'yahavta et Adonai Eloheka b'kol levaveka v'kol nefsheka v'kol moadeka. And he taught me that prayer in my early 20s, and I began to say that prayer and to began to feel the profound effects in my body and in my own spirit. a sense of divinity that was being awakened within my own self, that I am somehow more than just a physical body or an ethnic expression with biological proclivities, that somehow I am an impulse of intelligence, that I am spiritual. And as I continued to study in the Yehudim, I wanted to become more proficient in reading Ivrit, Hebrew, and I began to read a book, How to Pray as a Jew. And I read this book early on in my life, and this gave me a tremendous insight into Lashon HaKodesh. And Lashon HaKodesh is the holy tongue that Ivrit is. Ivrit, according to the Yehudim, in Jewish mysticism, the protoplasm of the universe. The words, the means by which the unmanifest world became manifest. For example, we see in the Torah, the first verses in the Torah, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashemayim v'et haaretz, translated, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. But the English translation and translation wasn't the cause of the manifestation. The manifestation occurred as a function of these words, these sequence of holy letters being surrendered in infinite silence, because before the creation all there was infinite silence, and the creative intelligence of these letters sequentially expressed gave rise to a physical manifestation. So that taught me, and was the means by which I became interested in the religious aspects of the Yehudim, Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, the 10 Sephirot that gave rise for the 4 worlds of emanation, creation, formation, and manifestations inherent in the sequence of sacred letters, which led me to a very, very profound prayer. Very profound prayer that I read daily, called Ana B'Koach, and it has tremendous benefits. I'll read it for you now. Again, a sequence of holy letters. It's also called the 42-letter name of God. It would be under Jewish mysticism. Ana B'Koach Gadulat Yemincha Tatir Setzruah Kabil Rinat Amka Sagvenu Taharenu Nora Nagibor Doshe Yehudika Kavavat Shamrim Barakim Taharim Rakamei Sitzdateka Tamid Gamlem Hasin Kadosh Barov Tuvka Nahil Aditeka Yahid Gehi Leamekape Zokare Kadushateka Shavatenu Kabil Ushma Sazakatenu Yodea Talmud Baruch Shem Kivod Malhuto Leolam Vayed. So as a young man, I became very intrigued with 2 things: transcending subjectivity and experienced the unified field of pure consciousness, the home of all the laws of nature, and synchronizing my mind with that, infusing that quality of pure being into my mind, and neurophysiological correlates that optimize the functioning of my body. And on a relative religious realm, I began to read the Torah and the Siddur as a technology of consciousness, which then led me later on in life to develop my own conception, my meditation technique, which is called a self-reflection technique, a means by which the small self reflects in the meditative state upon the cosmic self. Meditation, transcending subjectivity, experiencing objective, universal, pure being, and enjoying the fruits of that meditation in my practical life. My self-reflection technique became the direct experience of God. So I said at the outset that my concern was not reading about God. I found out that information then can be imparted in a couple of ways. Objective data through scientific research, stories, and sacred sound. And as an audiologist, I was always interested and intrigued by sound, and as a young man was identified with and concerned and had compassion for those individuals who had suffered hearing impairments and the auditory mechanism was not optimal. Sound was diminished, and they had sociological and educational implications. So I dedicated my life to working to a population whose auditory mechanism was dysfunctional. And that led me into the study of sound, which led me into the study of sacred sound, Lashon HaKodesh, as well as Vedas, Sanskrit. So as a young man, I was introduced to Sanskrit and became aware of my physiological response to a sequence of Sanskrit words, Om Bu Bhuvat Swaha Tat Savitu Varenyam Bargo Devasha Dihimai Dihiyo Yona Prachodayat, Gayatri Mantra, for example, and also reading the Shema daily and reading the Siddur and having profound neurological consequences, neurological responses to this sound that was equivalent to a deep meditation. So I knew from then it had profound evolutionary consequences. So that was the philosophy and that I ran into later on in life to answer the third question. So let me see now this next question that has been posed. My study of Kabbalah taught me that sacred sound, the Aleph Bet, for example, the 22 Hebrew letters, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Ket, Tet, Yud, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Sumak, Ayin, Pei, Zadi, Kuf, Resh, and Tav, was a technology of consciousness, the protoplasm of the universe that has neurophysiological implications and can optimize evolution and give one the experience of God. Now, God in the stories is an anthropomorphic entity, he. But the reality, and that's 20th century technology, the 21st century technology, and understanding that God is one infinite field of pure being, pure consciousness that has a threefold structure of knower, knowing, and known. So this experience of entering this field of pure consciousness optimizes my physiology and expands my awareness of the unity of diversity to see that one reality that is called God, because as I mentioned previously, the interpretation of the Shema, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Eloheinu, Hashem Echad, hear, O Yisrael, the Lord, our God, the Lord is one. One unified field of pure being, creative intelligence, has a threefold structure of the knower, the known, and the relationship between the two. So God is all, and that's the theory, that God is one. But by engaging sacred sound via the Aleph Bet and also in Sanskrit, and although I haven't studied Arabic, I'm not sure, but I'm sure it must be a sacred element in that, because sound has a tremendous effect on physiology, because physiology is just an expression of the laws of nature and has to do with sound. So the ultimate reality in life is sacred sound, the Aleph Bet, and the direct experience of that. Finally, for those interested in spirituality and meditation or studying spiritual texts like Kabbalah, what advice would you give them for starting on their journey? Well, I think each soul has its own karma and its own incarnation and its own destiny, and will synchronize with the optimum tradition, the spiritual tradition. And I would simply say that at the propitious moment in any soul's odyssey, one will interdigitate with a technology of consciousness that will deepen one's awareness of their true identity as not physical but spiritual, because we are impulses of spirituality, impulses of consciousness, if you will, incarnated into time and space, the lower world of manifestation, where we need a body to navigate. And during our lower stages of evolution and development, we identify with the body and the activity. However, on the long march of the soul in the corridor of time, the soul becomes aware by virtue of meeting someone. As I said, I met Dr. Goldstein one day and told him that I am Yehudi. And he says, oh, then in this case, here's the technology that led me down the corridor of the Yehudim, the Aleph Bet. And prior to that, even before that, while I was a student at the undergraduate level, I ran into an individual who introduced me into meditation. Meditation being a process of directing a steady flow of attention toward a mind tool. And a mind tool is called mantra in Sanskrit. And that mantra is a non-static impulse without meaning. And when the mind engages a non-static impulses without meaning, it turns toward its own nature and dives within itself. The dive within itself has a physiological correlate. The body settles down and the mind continues to settle down and experience the finest perception of that mantra, and then transcends it into the field, the unified field of pure being. And being is infused into the mind, and the mind becomes established in that and begins to no longer identify with the physical body. And when that happens, one has completed the objective of the individual incarnation. The individual incarnation objective is to discover the spiritual potential, which is a cosmic identity. So we are not individuals in division. We grow toward a state of unity. Unity consciousness is a consciousness of knowing at the same time, a simultaneous cosmic consciousness of the coexistence of the small self in the relative time, at the same time the coexistence of the universal self, the cosmic self, which then, as a continuation of practice, fuse together and is experienced as an intensified inner silence. The cosmic intelligence is experienced as a lesser degree of silence. Silence is my ultimate reality, silence that coexists with activity. And as we continue to meditate and deepen that silence, that subjective difference between relativity and cosmic being merges into one infinite, deep, universal silence, which then is said to be God consciousness. And that is an experience of being the pure being, a pure state of being at all times. Individuality is surrendered. Infinite silence is lived as the primary self, the ultimate self. And the organizing intelligence structures that silence in a way so that the person's behavior is evolutionary. You can love thy neighbor as thyself. Be compassionate. Be kind. Not violate the laws of Torah. Not violate the laws of any sacred writings, but the writings of themselves are not the experience of divinity. The writings have to be transcended through some technology of consciousness. And my technology of consciousness is a self-reflection technology which allows the mind to become infused with divinity, which gives rise to being stabilized in a conscious, cosmic perspective, unifying with God, the generator, the organizer, dispenser, that pure field of consciousness, and perceptions being refined to actually see the reality of duality, even within boundaries. The boundaries remain, but the perception of the ultimate reality is lived on the emotional level of being, on the level of senses, on the cognitive level of seeing and knowing the ultimate reality. So this is pure spirituality when it's manifest in its totality. So may you be blessed to continue to grow on your own individual odyssey, in religious odyssey that takes you into a more intimate relationship with divinity, in spirituality, ultimately merging with that spirituality, become one with God, which is the aim of our incarnation, because man is made in the image of God, and ye are gods, it says in Psalms 82:6, I think. Ye are gods, and we are gods in the small sense of the word, because heaven is to be lived here on earth. Baruch Hashem.